How's it going, everybody? Ted Purchase, Bold Lens Photography, and all that footage that you just saw right now and all those pictures was shot with this camera right here, the Panasonic G85 and the 12-60 kit lens. And there wasn't any other stabilization used there. I didn't use my my crane or even a tripod or anything. That's just the camera and just this lens, no other lenses and stabilization. So why did I buy a Panasonic G85? Well, anybody who's been following me knows that recently, I'm a photographer and I've been getting into video. And while I love my Olympus Micro Four Thirds gear, it just really falls behind on video compared to Canon, Sony, and of course Panasonic. Now, being somebody that already has the Micro Four Thirds lenses, I'm gonna gravitate towards Panasonic. Plus, it's absolutely fantastic. I am loving this camera. Even though this is a mid-level camera, I'm loving it just as much as my EM1 Mark II. And while this definitely doesn't keep up with the EM1 Mark II in stills, for videos it's really definitely does a little bit better job than the EM1 Mark II does. And having the EM10 Mark II as a backup camera was okay, but I'd like something that's a little bit better for a backup camera in case something happens when I'm doing a photo shoot. I got something better to replace it with. So as far as how much I paid for this, I got it on I got this on Amazon, factory refurbished for $790. And that was with the kit lens. So if you sell this kit lens, you can actually you can sell this for about $250, and then the camera is basically a $540 camera at that point. If you look online on eBay and you try to get one of these just the body only, they're usually at least like $600 or more. So if you plan on getting one of these and you want to get a really good price and you don't necessarily need the 12-60 3.5 to 5.6 kit lens, buy it with the kit lens, then sell the kit lens to buy whatever other lenses that you want. So ultimately, the used price of this is about $540. If you want to get it brand new, you can get it with the kit lens for $900. So that'll put you at about $650 for the body cost. So it's not a cheap body by any means, but it's not a really expensive one. And this thing is insanely just feature packed. I mean, crazy performance for what you're paying for. So it's well worth every penny. Let's go ahead and get into the build on this really quick. It's a great camera, and the build is no exception to that. You got yourself a flippy touchscreen, and one thing that's really nice about this, you can't see this because I got a tripod quick release on here, but underneath you actually have a port to hook up a battery grip to it, so like a real battery grip like a pro camera would have, which is amazing. The battery life on this has been really solid. I can shoot pretty much a whole day. It's not as good as the EM1 Mark II with its big fat monstrous battery in it. It's probably not as good as the G9 or the GH5 that have a bigger battery. But this isn't like no slouch either. It does pretty good. I think you should be completely fine to shoot all day with two batteries, unless you're just doing something like constant video non-stop. And if you are doing something like that, it even has a port for a fake battery, so you can put a fake battery in there so you can shoot as long as you want on it. The grip is nice. It's kind of the bigger DSLR style. It's a pretty big camera for a Micro Four Thirds, and Panasonic's kind of known for doing that. But the nice thing is that if you are putting a bigger lens on this, it's going to be really comfortable to use. It is a weather sealed body. It's solid, it feels great. The buttons are tactile and responsive. You got 4 knobs, your 2 dials to change your exposure here. They feel great, nice and smooth, easy to turn. Then you have another dial here to change basically from like 4K to time lapse to a time shutter to a single to a multiple shutter. Then you have, your one for your custom functions and your manual mode and switching to movie, just like every other camera does. And it's really nice and solid, and these things, they really take a good amount to turn them, so you're not gonna have to worry about accidentally shutting those off. You have your on and off switch right here on your right hand, which is one thing that I've always kind of not liked about Olympus. On my EM1 Mark II, I can switch that to the other side, but on some of the other Olympuses, it's on the left side. Now with these mirrorless cameras, since they're not a DSLR, I like to shut them off when I'm not taking a picture and flick them on quickly, so it's really nice to have that on your right hand where you're going to be holding the camera anyways. As far as the function buttons go on this, there's just a ton of them, and I mean, you got 5 function buttons, but then on top of that, you also have your little 4-way pad here that has buttons on it too. So you could switch that to where you could use it to move the focus point, or you could keep it how it is, and that will have your menu, your white balance, your ISO, a function button, a button to switch your AF areas, and a button for your menus. So you could really set this thing up to where you pretty much never have to menu dive in it, which is really nice, and I love that. But overall, the thing that I'd say about this is, like, once you get your hands on this, you will realize that the handling of this, the feeling of it, the function buttons, everything is really just feels like a pro camera. This does not feel like a $540 camera or a $900 camera. This thing feels like a $2,000 pro camera. It's really nice. They did a fantastic job making this really higher end mid-range camera, and that's really where the love was put in, was in that stuff. And in general, since I've been using this Panasonic, I have noticed that out of all the camera brands I'm using, I'm falling in love with Panasonic more than anything. I mean, I loved Olympus, but I'm liking these better. They just feel so refined. I mean, the layouts, the menus, the touchscreen is the best that there is. Oh, and you can use the touchscreen to change the autofocus points, and it works fantastic. Unlike some cameras, like my EM10, which was really buggy, this thing is buttery smooth. This touchpad, the look of it, the feel of it, the brightness, it kills any camera that I've ever used. It really feels like a little, iPhone 10 or something. It's a great touchpad, and just in general, it's some of the most refined cameras that I've used. I'm actually looking at getting a G9 because I fell in love with this one so much. Plus, I want something that's going to do a little bit better in video. And I went to the camera store the other day to play with the G9 and the Sony a7 III and the new Fujis and a few other cameras. And it's just the G9, and I did some post on Facebook about this. The refinement and the feel of it, they really feel like they're on a completely different level than every other brand that's out there. And I know they're not going to have the image quality of the Sonys, but the more I shoot, the more I could care less about image quality. Even your Micro Four Thirds cameras have insane image quality these days compared to back in the day what we used to have to deal with. It's really, some incredible stuff, and I've really just been, gravitating more towards cameras that just have good functionality and good controls. And, that a7 III, that makes some awesome images. But God, I just, like, after holding the G9, it just felt like I was holding a toy in my hand. It was just like really, it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't on the same level at all. So fantastic on that front. The electronic viewfinder in this is just as good as the EM1 Mark II, maybe even a little bit better, and just as good as any Sony. This is really like a high-level viewfinder, big magnification, good refresh rate. It's nice and smooth. It works fantastic. It's nothing like the cheaper Olympuses like the EM10 Mark II. It's really a good high-level professional grade EVF. You'll absolutely love the EVF on this. Now, the big thing as far as image quality, at the end of the day, this is a Micro Four Thirds sensor, and it's also kind of an entry-level Micro Four Thirds sensor. It's the 16 megapixel, but they did take out the anti-aliasing filter to help sharpen it up a little bit, which was really a great move by Panasonic. But ultimately, as far as your images goes, it's just what you're going to expect from this or the GX85 or any of the EM10 series. It's good, but it's not great. I feel pretty comfortable shooting video or photo at about 1600 ISO, up to 3200. Still isn't bad, definitely usable, but once you get past that, it's a little rough compared to the EM1 Mark II, which I feel pretty comfortable at 6400. I definitely feel like that has a big step up in image quality for stills. The dynamic range, it's usually good enough, but when you get in those bright situations, sometimes you can never have enough dynamic range, like when you're doing landscape or exterior real estate photos. So it's good, but it's not great. But for a lot of photography, you know, I see so many people that are so scared to go with micro four thirds or crop sensor because they go and they shoot in low light. But in my opinion, with a good, decent, fast lens, some skill, and a nice speed light, you should be able to go shoot any wedding with a micro four thirds camera or any low light shooting. It's really not that bad as long as you can get some lights in there. But I get some people do extreme low light stuff where you also have to have a high shutter speed, like sports, or they do concert photography. I'd say anything besides that, this will do just fine. And in most situations, your dynamic range will do just fine. You can always do sky swaps, HDR, that kind of thing. It's just, it's a downside, but you get a whole lot of upsides. You know, you get this awesome selection of lenses that you just don't get with the other brands. One thing to point out, it is a single card slot, which is pretty much expected. It would have been cool if it was two. If it was two, I could recommend this for wedding photographers, but you know, I can't recommend for most pro photography to go with just one card slot. So it's kind of a little unfortunate, but it's more than expected for a camera at this price range to only have one card slot in it. That's pretty much standard these days. The autofocus on this camera, like you've never seen anything like it before. It is absolutely phenomenal. So if you guys don't know, the Panasonics, they are a contrast-based system, but they use this depth from defocus technology, which basically looks at the out of focus areas of the image, and depending on what it sees, then what it will do is that's how it determines the distance instead of using phase detect sensors. So it actually needs a profile for every lens to be able to shoot to be able to get that DFD mode activated. If you don't have a Panasonic lens, then you don't have depth from defocus. That's really important to remember because that's the biggest downside of going with Panasonic versus Olympus. Olympus is like this EM1 Mark II. That will have great focus no matter what lens you throw on it. This will still be pretty good with an Olympus lens. It's going to hunt a little bit. It's going to be tough to shoot anything that's moving with it, just like if you shot on a cheaper Olympus camera or some of the older mirrorless cameras. But once you slap a Panasonic lens on this, and there's a lot of good Panasonic lenses out there, the focusing on this destroys everything out there. I mean, the A7 Mark III, it's pretty good. The EM1 Mark II, it's pretty good. The XT2, they're all good. They can all track really good. I used to own a D500, so even on the DSLR side, you know, those are all pretty good. Even this entry-level camera thrashes them, and the G9 is even better when I got my hands on that. It's insanely fast. I posted a video on Facebook. I did 44 shots of a bird in flight that was actually really close. So this thing was moving, you know, just right in front of me, super fast. I don't know, it's probably about 20 feet away, maybe about 12 feet in the sky. It's just a seagull buzzing around. This thing nailed it. 44 shots in a row, perfectly sharp on every single shot. I mean, as long as it's nothing extreme, this is going to hit it. This you're gonna love this autofocus system. It's absolutely amazing. The only quirks that I've had with it is that you basically just want to use the single point, which you can actually change the size of. So you can make it really big or really small. So basically it's like a single point and a group in one mode. I've noticed that vastly works better than like the tracking, which for some reason it's like Top Gun. It does like a lock on, beep, beep, beep. And if it locks on, it sticks on them like nothing else. If it doesn't lock on, which it doesn't do a lot of the time, then it just sits there and keeps blinking, which is really weird. And it could be a bird in the middle of the sky and it will just blink and not lock on sometimes, and then sometimes it will. So I would avoid that. You can also do these other group areas, which works fine, works pretty much good as a single point, but I've just found the single point to work great. One other thing that's a little bit quirky with this camera, it's not a deal breaker, not a huge deal, but that's the autofocus modes. I don't know if you guys can see this, but you actually have 3 different modes on here. You have manual focus, autofocus continuous, autofocus single, and then that one has a slash in there for autofocus flexible. Now, everything there's pretty self-explanatory. The autofocus flexible mode, what that does is that's basically like an automatic mode. It's going to be a single autofocus. If you hit the button once if you but it's going to automatically switch to continuous if the thing starts moving. It's kind of weird. You'd have to use it. And one thing that I've noticed is that if you go in continuous, it kind of hunts back and forth, and you'll hear other reviewers talk about this or people that use the camera. If you're in continuous and you're holding on to something, it kind of hunts back and forth, but then as soon as you hit the trigger, it nails it, like every time, just as good as, you know, when I was tracking that bird. But if you're in autofocus flexible, I've noticed that it will track and stick on things, but it won't hunt back and forth. And when I'm doing, you know, whether I'm shooting something still or something moving, it nails it, and it switches in between the different modes like that, and it really just works perfect. And I haven't found any need to switch off of that. So you know, I've heard some people complain about the autofocus on the Panasonic cameras. I think you just have to know how to set it right. It's a little quirky, it's a little weird to work with, but if you just throw it on that single point, which like I said, you can make big like a group, and you keep it on the autofocus flexible, it just works flawless. It's been amazing, the autofocus on this camera. So that's definitely a huge plus. This also has in-body stabilization like all the newer Panasonic cameras. So no matter what lens you put on there, you have really good stabilization on there. It's not as good as the EM1 Mark II unless you have a lens like this that's also stabilized. This uses the dual IS2 system. I was able to get, even, you know, at 12 millimeters, quarter second handheld shots pretty much every time. Even a half second was possible. I couldn't get anything quicker than a half second, but really good solid stabilization. I've been completely impressed by that. It's amazing that you have stabilization that's so good on a entry-level camera. So as far as the video goes, one of the main reasons why I bought this camera, it's funny, I bought it for video, but I've been falling in love with it for stills. The video's been really good. It makes a nice clean looking picture. You can see the footage that I post there. You don't get any log recording, but you do get Cine-like D and Cine-like V. And if you ever looked at like Leaming LUT, a lot of people have actually been using the Cine-like D on the GH5 to get the most dynamic range out of it, and they've been doing it with this camera too. So if you ever get the chance, look at Leaming LUT. It's like a universal system that somebody created to where you can get like all these different camera brands looking exactly the same using this LUT and the settings that they tell you for each camera. I haven't got a chance to do that yet. I'll be doing that in the future. Does 4K at up to 30 frames a second. You could do 1080p at 60 frames a second. So it's pretty good solid video features. Nothing to write home about, but overall the control's been good. The auto white bounce has been good on it. The touchscreen and just the general handling have been awesome for video. In general, it's just a nice solid little video camera that really does the job that I need it to do. Of course, you have a mic jack in it. One thing that's unfortunate is the mic jack is about right here, and so if you have your screen flipped out, the mic jack is right in the way, which was kind of annoying. Same thing on my EM1 Mark II, at least that one's kind of up higher. This one's right in the middle of it, which is a little frustrating to use. So one thing about the touchscreen on this, like I said, not only is it beautiful, bright, gorgeous, buttery smooth, all that good stuff, you know, it's a beautiful touchscreen, but also just the menus, and let me turn it on here really quick. When you go through the menus, it's actually, you know, has some like pretty nice big buttons there, so they really did a good job designing the menus and the camera in general to be interactive with the touchscreen. Same thing when you actually go to shoot. If you hit this function button, you can go and you can touch pretty much anything there. ISO, white balance, you know, your movie mode, your picture mode, your AF mode. It's really nice. When I use the Sony and the Olympus cameras and my old Nikon cameras, I'm trying to use the touchscreen to touch stuff on those, and it doesn't like work. It's just a really nice touch. For beginners, it's going to be really nice because if you're used to using an iPhone, it's going to be a lot easier to adapt to that. But even for advanced users, it's just one more mark to the refinement of this camera and how easy and quick it is to use. If you thought that you don't really care because you never used a touchscreen, well, then you haven't used a Panasonic yet, because you are going to love the Panasonic touchscreens. So getting into the features of this camera, it's definitely feature packed. You have focus stacking, so if you're into macro, not only is 4/3 in general just a great macro system, but this has the focus stacking in it. You have four different custom modes, which is really nice. If you go to custom mode 1, that's going to be just whatever you set it to. Then you go to custom mode 2, that's actually going to have 3 options you can change with the touch screen. Which is great. I love the fact that there's 4 custom modes. You have the 4K photo modes in this, so if you're doing action, that lets you do pre-burst and all that stuff, but it only gives you an 8 megapixel file, so I haven't really even tested that because I don't think I'll ever use it. The higher end ones like the g85 and the g9, they have the 6K photo mode, so they actually give you an 18 megapixel file. That's something that I would actually use, but with this, I probably wouldn't use that. I mean, and it could do some tricks like post-focusing with that, where you can change the focus after the fact, which is cool, but I just don't need that, and I don't think I'll ever use it, so I'm not even going to really test that. You know, little pop-up flash on there. Who cares? It doesn't let you point it up. It's kind of just whatever. I mean, I don't really care about pop-up flashes. It has Wi-Fi in it. The Wi-Fi has been absolutely great. It's definitely, you know, a good app. It's actually the best Wi-Fi app I've used. I was kind of hoping that I could manual focus there a lot better in video, which actually didn't work that good. But everything else worked fantastic, and it had a great refresh rate, and the controls were nice and smooth, and you could do a lot of different stuff. I never use the Wi-Fi things, and that's probably the only time I'll ever use it was when I just tested this camera. But really cool if you do like Wi-Fi, controlling your camera with your phone and sending photos back and forth. This does a fantastic job, way better than SnapBridge, much better than Olympus. I can attest to that. It also has this high resolution mode, which lets you get kind of like a sharper, higher resolution image. I haven't tested that yet, but I'll be looking at doing a video on that down the road. And of course, you have all your mirrorless goodies. You have zebra stripes to make sure you're not overexposing your highlights, and a WYSIWYG, all that good stuff. As you can see, I'm in absolute awe of this camera. It's amazing, it's incredible, but it's not without its downsides. And as far as what I don't like about it, there's some obvious things like the image quality could be better. You know, if it had the 20 megapixel sensor that's in, you know, the G9 or something, but I don't expect it to be as good as a, you know, $1,700 camera. This isn't a $1,700 camera. This is a $540 camera. But the only real complaints that I have were just a few quirks with the handling, and it's a little bit annoying because it has so many amazing features. The build's awesome. The refinement of this camera is amazing, but there's a few little quirks that are kind of annoying with it. One thing that I don't like is that when you're doing any sort of burst, your AF goes away. So if you have your AF in the corner or something and you go to do a burst, then you can't see where your AF point was, and I don't get that. There's a little workaround to where you can make a target in the middle of it, but you can't move that target, but you'll be able to see that when you're doing a burst. It's just kind of unfortunate because the autofocus, like I said, on this camera is absolutely incredible, so you think they would do something just small like that would really complement it, and it's not done on this camera. There's a few other little quirks with it. One thing that I've noticed is that if you're shooting in manual mode on this, there's no real setup to put in what you see is what you get autofocused. You can put in zebra stripes, but if you want to make it to where it actually shows your exposure as you're changing it, you can't do that unless you switch on. There's a preview mode that makes it to where it does your depth of field preview, but also a shutter speed preview, and that will show you. But then if you get a slow shutter speed, then it slows down the frame rate with the shutter speed. So if you're at 1/4 of a second, then it slows you down to, you know, 4 frames a second or whatever. So it's just kind of weird. But then when you throw it in the other modes like aperture or shutter priority and you use the exposure compensation, then it actually adjusts it. but not if you use any exposure, but it won't let you use exposure compensation at all in manual mode, which is just kind of weird quirk. The Olympus cameras don't have that. Another issue that I had with this camera is that if you want to do some sort of live histogram, what it does is it makes a little tiny box that you can move around, and it's just a little goofy and annoying. I like the Olympuses much better, where they have like this thin histogram strip at the bottom of the camera. Anyways, overall, I gotta say, I've been absolutely blown away by this camera. It feels refined, it feels amazing. It's just a solid performer all around. So if you're looking for a camera like that, I definitely suggest checking out the Panasonic G85. And anyways, guys, I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, enable notification, and comment down below. If you'd like to support this channel so I can make future content, check out my website, boldlensphotography.com, where I sell fine art prints. You can also donate money at patreon.com/boldlensphotography. And I'll have links below to all my social media accounts. And hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.